Marine Corps Private Rachel Harner didn't believe in marriage until she fell in love with the most amazing man.
Michael changed my perception on how relationships should be.
She was just so happy, and they were really just perfect for each other.
But just when Rachel thought Michael Parson was her true love, she'd discover the man of her dreams was a monster in disguise.
I got the gut feeling that he was hiding something.
He didn't care who he hurt, how he hurt them.
He had done such a horrible, horrible thing. I just kept saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always. April 2010, love and marriage were the last things on 19-year-old Rachel Harner's mind.
I didn't actually plan on getting married, ever. I'd just come out of a relationship that didn't really end well. I just knew that it was going to take a little bit of time before I was willing to invest myself again.
But while Rachel was flighty in love, the Georgia girl was rock solid in her commitment to everything else, especially her duties as a reservist in the U.S. Marine Corps.
I loved it. At the time that I was waiting to be deployed, I was working as a waitress and a bartender. I was very, very busy.
And Rachel was also hunting for a third job to help ends meet.
I've always loved animals, and I wanted to work at a pet store. So I printed out an application, I filled it out, and I walked in.
Rachel couldn't help but feel like a smitten kitten when she first laid eyes on the manager conducting her interview, Michael Parson.
I noticed him right away. I thought he was very handsome. He had beautiful, smooth skin and a very intoxicating voice.
Tell me about yourself.
During the course of the interview, I told him that I was a Marine, and he pulled out his dog tags.
Yeah, I was in the Navy Corps.
I just kind of thought, ka-ching.
Michael told Rachel he'd been deployed to Iraq and received a Purple Heart after an IED exploded.
Michael said that he went to Iraq twice, and he had injured his lower back. I liked his military background.
3 days later, Michael offered Rachel the job, which she accepted with every intention of keeping her little crush in check.
Hey, Rachel, how are you?
But as the weeks passed, her feelings for Michael only grew.
Rachel would go on and on about Michael. It was a friendship that was definitely blossoming, and it was special to her.
After learning from coworkers that Michael was single, Rachel asked him out for lunch.
Michael was very surprised, but he said yes.
I'd love to, yeah.
As the two chatted over barbecue, Michael mentioned he was 28, nearly 10 years Rachel's senior.
So that doesn't bother you?
I was intimidated by the fact that he was older, smarter, more mature. But I was attracted to him. When we left, he kissed me. At first, I kind of just wanted friendship, but I was interested in Michael in a more than friendly way. And so, inevitably, me and Michael became intimate.
By October of 2010, it became clear that Rachel and Michael were more than just friends with benefits.
When Rachel would start talking about Michael and her eyes would just kind of glaze over, you can tell there's no way she's letting him go.
For the first time, I could imagine growing old with somebody. And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
The couple did their best to see each other as often as their busy schedules would allow.
I was working 3 jobs. But for the most part, we spent a great deal of time with each other. And I would stay at his place, and he would stay at mine.
But when Rachel stayed at Michael's apartment, she couldn't help but notice something strange.
There was a lot of feminine products around. He had female shampoo and conditioner, brushes, and things that I wouldn't have expected. It didn't seem to fit because he was single.
This strange discovery was just the tip of the iceberg. And soon, Rachel would discover just how far and deep Michael's secrets actually went.
His whole life was a lie.
He's a monster. It's incomprehensible.
I was in shock. I refused to believe that Michael had done this. I did not know this man.
By October of 2010, Rachel Harner was head over heels for her new boyfriend, Michael Parson, but confused by the discovery of some feminine products in his home.
I wouldn't have expected a homegrown bachelor like him to have them. So I asked him, why do you have so much female stuff?
Any doubts Rachel might have had soon disappeared.
He informed me that his aunt, Adina, stayed with him while she was building a house in Atlanta.
This is her stuff.
And he showed me a photo, and I was like, wow, she's very beautiful. How old is she? And he said, late 40s. I understood. It's something that I would do for my family and vice versa.
But it wasn't always easy. Aunt Adina's visits forced Michael to sleep on the sofa.
He would complain the next day because his back would hurt from his injury. And I told him, just make her sleep on the futon. He's like, I'm not going to do that to my aunt.
But the pain in his back became so bad that Michael went for a scan of his spine and was given some horrible news.
Michael called me and he said he had spinal cancer. We were both shocked. I felt like I had found this beautiful, wonderful treasure, and all of it was about to be taken away from me.
Michael told Rachel he would have to go through chemo and radiation to stand a fighting chance.
She was very interested in finding more about it. She got really into natural remedies, things that would help the nausea. She wanted to make sure he's eating right, sleeping right.
But Michael's scheduled treatments always seemed to coincide with Rachel's mandatory military events. And in May, this Georgia girl received orders to complete training at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina.
I was very upset about it because I really wanted to be there for Michael. I always just assumed it was bad timing.
Soon, Michael was too frail to continue working at the pet store and had to take a job working at home for a phone company instead.
Michael lost a lot of weight. And he would throw up so frequently and so violently that sometimes there would be blood. We were very frightened because nothing seemed to be working.
So when Michael told Rachel that his only hope was laser radiation surgery and that the top facility for the procedure was in South Carolina, Rachel didn't think twice.
The surgeries were incredibly expensive. I left my car with him when I was stationed at Camp Lejeune for my training. And I told him that he should sell it, and whatever he could get from it, he should use it on his surgery.
Rachel just wanted to be there for Michael, do anything and everything she could, just to help him through it.
I was determined not to let this beat us.
In May of 2011, Michael told Rachel he underwent surgery and things couldn't have gone better.
He would have to do it a couple more times, but for the most part, it had worked. I was so relieved.
And when Rachel learned that she would deploy to Afghanistan in 4 months, she knew their love could endure the distance.
I had no doubts. I had absolute 100% confidence in Michael.
Rachel even made Michael the main beneficiary of all her military assets.
He would receive all of the money I had in my accounts. I put all of my belongings in storage.
Where'd you get this from?
My friend asked me to hold on to his pistol. I had a lot of equipment, and I packed every worldly possession I owned, and Michael had the key.
But as July 4th approached, Michael wanted one more thing from Rachel.
Me, Michael, and my family were just hanging out. And Michael just pulled out a ring and said, Rachel, you're the most beautiful woman in the world.
Will you marry me?
I was like, of course. It was exactly what I wanted. I was ecstatic.
I could tell she was surprised. I really still felt that she was too young, but she was definitely happy.
Only one major hurdle stood between Rachel, Michael, and wedded bliss: deployment.
I was deploying to Afghanistan. I was very scared, but I believed in Michael, and I had faith in him.
Who could have known what a tragic mistake that would be? Especially when long-distance love turned into unimaginable lies.
He had this whole different life, and Rachel didn't have a clue.
Michael was able to manipulate people his entire life.
I had been betrayed and tricked. I felt all the blood drain from my face.
In the fall of 2011, after accepting her boyfriend Michael Parsons' wedding proposal, Rachel Harner was stationed in Afghanistan for 7 months.
The number one thing that made it easier to endure was Michael, and in the scariest moments of my time in Afghanistan, Michael was the one I was thinking of.
Even though Michael's cancer was officially in remission, Rachel still wished she could be there for him.
Rachel and Michael communicated in every way you could think of long distance, even though she was so far away.
I only had one opportunity to video chat Michael during my deployment. It's the first time I'd seen his face in 5 or 6 months, and I was very excited about it.
But Rachel's excitement quickly turned to shock.
As I was talking to him, a woman walked into his office. And she walked right up to him and just leaned forward and kissed him on the lips. I lost my mind. I said, "Who's this woman?" He said, "That's my aunt."
She needs someplace to stay.
I was like, "She kissed you on the lips. That's not something your aunt does."
Michael tried to calm his fiancée down.
He's like, "That's just the way our family is."
We're just an affectionate family.
And after a little bit of arguing, I accepted his explanation. He told me all about her, and so I ended up apologizing to Michael.
It's all right.
And I said, I have insecurities because we've been away from each other for the past 5 months.
A few weeks later, Rachel received some exciting news. She would be returning to the States.
I was ecstatic. I felt like there was nothing that was going to stand in our way.
In April 2012, the couple finally reunited at Camp Lejeune.
Rachel and I got back from Afghanistan, and I just see Rachel run into Michael's arms. And there's just the look on her face of just pure joy.
The happy couple went to a nearby hotel room and spent 3 days catching up. After a few more days on the base, Rachel finally returned to Atlanta, and the two lovebirds went to dinner with her parents.
At the dinner table, they were just holding hands. He was feeding her bites of his food from his plate, just talking about how happy they were that she's home.
That night, the couple settled into another hotel, since Aunt Adina was in town once again. 4 days later, they parted ways.
I had to go back to Augusta because I was still on active duty. So I kissed him, and I told him I loved him, and I was going to see him that weekend.
But around 10 o'clock that evening, Rachel was startled by a knock on her door.
I opened up the hotel room door, and it was the police. And they were like, "Rachel Harner?" I was like, "Yes, sir, that's me." He's like, "Do you know Michael Parson?" I was like, "Yes, sir. What's going on?"
I need you to come with us.
And what they said next was just the beginning of a nightmare that would consume Rachel's life for years to come.
All the lies that Michael had told her began to unravel.
What Michael did was sickening.
I did not believe what I was hearing. I just kept saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God."
If you have a story for Who the Bleep and would like to appear on the series, go to investigation.discovery.com. In April 2012, Rachel Harner was stunned to find police at her hotel room, asking about her fiancé, Michael Parson.
And they drove me to the police department, and they took me to an interrogation room. I was like, I don't know what's going on. All I know is I'm really freaked out right now.
Rachel could hardly believe her ears when investigators began questioning her about Michael's wife.
I was like, Michael can't be married. He's not. We're engaged. I was like, we're getting married in October. There's no way that he can be married.
And that's when police said the words that would change her life forever.
Michael Parsons' wife was Adina Parson.
I was in shock. They showed me a picture of her, and I said, that's his aunt. And he said, no, that's his wife. They'd been married for a few years.
And that was just the beginning of the lies.
We informed Rachel that Michael was 42, not 30 years old. He was married before Adina, and that he had a child living in South Carolina.
I felt all the blood drain from my face because I realized his cancer treatments were in South Carolina.
That's when police dropped yet another bombshell.
The hospital records showed that Michael had never received any type of treatment for any type of cancer whatsoever.
I refused to believe it, and I argued with him. I looked them right in the eye, and I said, he threw up in front of me, he was ill, he lost weight. I do not know how Michael lost all that weight or why he was sick.
But the harder Rachel tried to defend Michael's character, the more holes police poked in his stories.
Michael was in the military but never served overseas or in any type of combat situation. His injuries were from falling off of a roof.
I was confused and upset, and I was in complete and utter denial.
Police clearly had Rachel's attention, and next they delivered the most shocking blow of all.
On April 20th, Michael made a phone call to Adina to lure her out of their apartment complex. When Adina came out, he was there waiting for her to come outside. She was shot 2 to 3 times in the head, and then was shot 5 to 6 times across her body. We believe Michael planned this attack.
Police revealed Adina had survived, but was in critical condition.
Michael had shot his wife. And less than 24 hours later, he was in my arms after he had done such a horrible, horrible thing. I did not believe what I was hearing. I just kept saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then Detective McGinnis described the make model of the gun. And it happened to be the exact same gun that was in my storage unit, and Michael had the key. It finally hit me that Michael had committed this crime. I couldn't deny it anymore.
On May 5th, 2012, Michael Parson was found hiding out in Texas. He was arrested and extradited to Georgia. Michael was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault and battery, and making false statements to the police.
Michael never admitted his guilt, but we believe Michael's motive in this shooting was so that he could go ahead and marry and spend the rest of his life with Rachel Hunter.
I don't believe necessarily that Michael did this as an act of love so much as an act of cold, calculating indifference.
He's a monster. I was full of rage. It's incomprehensible, and it disgusted us.
She had no idea that everything about him was a lie. What Michael did to her was sickening. It was just gruesome.
On May 20th, 2013, Michael Parson went to trial and pleaded not guilty, but his lies ultimately caught up with him. 3 days later, he was convicted of all charges. He received a 35-year prison sentence.
It doesn't undo the damage that's been done. There's been justice, but everybody who has been touched by Michael Parson has been irrevocably damaged.
Today, Rachel is still bothered by the clues she overlooked.
The single most thing that I regret is not saying, you know what, I'd like to meet Adina. It could have changed the entire outcome.
And she still has no idea how Michael was able to fake cancer so convincingly.
I don't know if he took weight pills or got his hands on actual chemo pills. I don't know what Michael did to make himself sick.
While Rachel didn't suffer like Adina, she is also a victim of Michael Parsons' betrayal.
I think Rachel will never be able to trust the way she used to trust.
27-year-old Jamie Hart was losing faith that he'd ever lay eyes on that special someone. Until he met an ambitious teaching assistant named Melissa Stredney.
I found her quite attractive. She was kind of quirky, kind of funny. She seemed to be a free spirit.
Jamie was in love with her, and this is the woman he wanted to be in his life.
But behind Melissa's pixie style and pretty face was a turbulent past.
She was definitely in a downward spiral. They didn't know what she might do next.
And by the time Jamie saw what he was in for, there was no getting out.
Jamie never believed that she would go to the extreme that she did.
I said, you don't want to do this. I remember my vision going black.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. Columbus, Ohio resident Jamie Hart had done his fair share of dating, but had never found the one connection that clicked.
I was just kind of looking for someone to go on a few dates with and see if there was any chemistry.
The 27-year-old collections agent always tried to keep a positive attitude. So in the early summer of 2008, while waiting for coffee at his local cafe, Jamie exchanged smiles with an attractive girl in line.
The line was extremely long. I made the comment, man, we're going to be here for a while. And she kind of chuckled and said,
Yeah, it looks like we are.
And we just kind of started talking back and forth.
The young woman introduced herself as Melissa Stredney. And when their coffee came, Jamie decided to keep the ball rolling.
So we just sat down and had a conversation for about an hour or so. I found her quite attractive. She seemed kind of quirky, kind of funny. She seemed to be free spirit, but well-adjusted.
And Jamie was impressed by the 27-year-old's drive and ambition.
She had her bachelor's degree already. She was a graduate teaching assistant for the chemistry department in a local university here. She had a lot of things going for her.
After exchanging phone numbers, Jamie was pleased when Melissa texted him almost immediately about seeing a movie together. The date went so well, soon the two were inseparable.
As the relationship progressed, there was more and more chemistry. I found myself falling in love with her.
Before Jamie knew it, he and Melissa were in a hot and heavy committed relationship just a few months into dating.
He was excited at that time, but me and my wife, we were kind of taken back as to how sudden things were developing in the relationship. But Jamie sounded extremely happy.
Still, Jamie was hesitant when, after 6 months together, Melissa asked him to move in with her.
It kind of seemed like the natural progression of how the relationship was going. But Melissa was moving a little bit more quickly than I was ready to do.
For the first time, Jamie gently put on the brakes. After all, they hadn't been through any of life's trials and tribulations yet. That is, until February that year.
Melissa told me that she was going to resign her position from the university. She didn't really go into detail why, just say there was a misunderstanding with her and some of the students. When I kind of probed about what the misunderstanding was, Melissa was upset, angry, so I didn't really question it.
Jamie wasn't sure what to think, but as the weeks passed, Melissa couldn't seem to stop crying.
She told me that she had depression and some anxiety issues that she was battling with for a few years. She went into a local hospital for depression. So I'm like, this must be a pretty bad spell. But there's a lot of people in the world that do battle depression. So it wasn't anything to stop me from continuing to see her.
Jamie was relieved when Melissa was discharged a week later.
She was taking medication and seeing a therapist once or twice every few weeks. That zeal and passion for life returned. She seemed to be back to her normal self.
Then Melissa told Jamie she had a big surprise for him.
She was at my apartment. She presented me with a card. And it said, "Congratulations, you're going to be a father." And I'm like, wow. All right, that's exciting.
Jamie was even more stunned when Melissa said she wasn't just pregnant, she was expecting triplets.
My reaction to that was shock. I wasn't out of the realm of possibilities in my mind because twins run in my family. Even though I was worried, like, how are we gonna do this? Being a father was one of my dreams.
But before long, his excitement would turn into heartache, and then horror.
Everywhere he went, she would show up.
She knew exactly what she was doing.
This was not the person I fell in love with. This was the ultimate betrayal.
In April of 2010, Jamie Hart and his girlfriend, Melissa Stredney, were expecting triplets.
There was that initial shock. There was that sense of excitement and happiness that comes with that.
He was ecstatic, nervous, freaked out, every emotion that you could feel. And he really took that responsibility seriously.
And since Melissa seemed to be doing so well with her antidepressants, Jamie felt it was time to take the next step in their relationship. Jamie moved in with Melissa, and the couple set a wedding date for October of that year.
I thought things were just moving too fast, and we even mentioned it to him. Are you sure this is something you want to do this early? And he said, yeah, this is what I want.
And as Jamie focused on his future with Melissa, he became even more excited about being a father.
I wanted to be an active member. These were my children that she was carrying, so I wanted to be there for every milestone.
But when Melissa started scheduling prenatal visits without him, Jamie couldn't help but feel slighted.
They always seemed to be when I was working or when I had other obligations. I would say, if you're having an appointment, let me know. I can get those days off. And she said she didn't want to burden me with that because we were in a little bit of financial difficulty, so missing work wasn't really an option.
But when Melissa shut Jamie out of a major pregnancy milestone, he grew flat out angry.
Sometime in the late stages of the first trimester, Melissa told me that she got an ultrasound. And I went, oh, awesome, can I see it? She said, well, my dad wanted to see it and I already mailed it to him. Why would you send it to your father but not let the father of the children see it? And I was quite upset that she did that. I wanted to be there for every appointment, and I made it very clear that that was very important to me.
Sadly, he wouldn't get the chance.
A few days later, I came home and Melissa was distraught, and she told me that she went to the hospital that day and that she actually miscarried. You know, I did my best to comfort her. I was in a state of shock. Both of us shed a lot of tears that night.
Jamie barely had time to feel his own grief before Melissa plunged back into a dark depression. Jamie even found himself questioning his desire to get married now that they were no longer expecting.
I had serious thoughts about ending engagement, but I kind of thought to end a relationship, especially someone you loved, after they had a miscarriage would be unforgivable.
He had already asked her to marry him, and he wanted to do the right thing as far as not abandoning her.
Then, almost overnight, Jamie saw an entirely different side to Melissa.
She would call me, like, worthless. Just anything that she could think of. I would just kind of zone her out and not really hear what she was saying.
Until one night, when Melissa took her abuse to the next level.
It was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and she was over top of me, just swinging away, physically assaulting me. She was telling me to get out of the house.
But when Jamie tried to leave, Melissa suddenly apologized.
She kind of made it into like, if I would have left, I would be abandoning her.
Jamie decided to let the incident slide, but despite his best efforts at keeping Melissa calm, there was no peace on the horizon. And before long, Jamie would realize his unhappy fiancée wasn't just miserable, she was monstrous.
She was very angry. Who knew what she was capable of?
It was crazy. He never believed that she would do that.
She knew where I would be. It was becoming more and more scary. I was thinking, how much longer can she do this?
In September of 2010, Jamie Hart's fiancée, Melissa Stredney, was becoming volatile after a miscarriage.
She was verbally abusing me and she was physically assaulting me. Even though she was suffering from depression, I was turning more and more into the victim.
She would threaten to commit suicide if he left. I think he had a sense of responsibility to her. He really was deep into that caregiver role.
Then one night, Jamie woke up to a frightening sight.
Melissa was awake, and I was like, what are you doing up? And she's like,
I can't sleep.
And then I see that she has in her hands a kitchen knife. I'm kind of dazed and confused. I'm like, why do you have a knife? Her only response was,
I can't sleep. I can't sleep.
Jamie stayed calm and gently took the knife from Melissa's hand.
I was more concerned she was going to hurt herself than myself. I ended up staying up with her the rest of the night. She eventually kind of dozed off.
The following morning, Jamie reached out to Melissa's therapist. And soon Melissa was on some new medication. But Jamie was torn.
I was very upset. This woman was completely different than the woman that I met initially. But I can't abandon her. I was concerned about how she was going to get by if I would have left.
But just a few days later, Jamie finally reached his breaking point.
One evening I came home from going out with a friend. I noticed that Melissa was gone, which was kind of strange. But I also noticed some of my personal belongings were gone. There were mementos, photos, miscellaneous records, totally missing. I immediately called her and asked her where my belongings were. She just laughed and hung up on me. It was at that moment that I made the decision that I had enough. These were things that I would never be able to replace. She was stealing my memories. I called my father up and we packed up as much stuff as I could in my car and his car and left.
It was a separation of not only ending the relationship, but ending him knowing Melissa altogether.
But Melissa wasn't going to let Jamie go without a fight.
She was starting to send me threatening messages, saying that she would find me and stab me. They were always of physical harm. She knew where I would be at certain times of the day. It was becoming more and more scary. She would show up 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a week and try to confront me. I started trying to alter my patterns or places where I would be.
But Melissa would not be ignored. On December 14th, 2010, Jamie bundled up and drove into work. As he exited his car, braced against the freezing wind, he found himself facing something much colder.
I only made it about 10 feet from my car where I was immediately stopped by Melissa. I asked her what she was doing here. Melissa turned to me and said, "Get in my car or else." And I'm like, "Excuse me?"
Knowing instinctively not to get in, Jamie attempted to reason with Melissa.
And she pulled out a silver and black handgun. I was shocked, scared. I said, "What are you doing? You don't want to do this. Please put the gun away." At that moment, time kind of stopped for me. When it was clear to her that I was not going to get into her car, she shot me. I remember my vision going out black.
Pierced by the bullet in his left eye, Jamie's light dimmed and his sight vanished as Melissa fled the scene.
Melissa immediately pulled out of the parking lot. 8 separate people saw this incident and were already on the phone with the police.
Emergency vehicles were dispatched as authorities hurtled down Ohio highways to find and stop an armed madwoman.
It was like pulling a pin on a grenade.
Police were converging on the area. They didn't know what she might do next.
If you have a story for Who the Bleep and would like to appear on the series, go to investigation.discovery.com. On December 14th, 2010, police were hunting Jamie Hart's ex-fiancée, Melissa Stredney, after she fired a bullet into his face and fled. Within minutes, an officer locked onto Melissa's car.
A police officer pulled out behind her, lights and sirens signaling her to pull over. She would not stop.
As Melissa accelerated toward a busy intersection, the quick-thinking policeman made a tough decision.
He executed a maneuver in which he rammed the back of her car. With guns drawn, other officers converged. They didn't know if she still had that gun in the car or not. They didn't know what she might do next. They were able to pull her out of the car at gunpoint and take her into custody at that point.
Melissa slowly surrendered, but the gun was missing.
Melissa told the police that as she pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main road, she had pitched a gun out the window. They started walking from the point of where she left the business to the point of where she was arrested, and they were able to find the gun.
Melissa was charged with 5 felonies, including attempted murder and kidnapping. Meanwhile, Jamie was rushed to the nearest hospital.
I was instantly in shock. That was kind of a sleepless night for us. We were numb. Jamie, he was just in our prayers.
Miraculously, Jamie survived, but the bullet had completely destroyed his left eye, shattering his skull and entering the base of his tongue. Luckily, the bullet never pierced his brain.
They had to surgically remove the eye. It was shocking to see him laying there. It was very emotional.
Jamie's sight returned in his right eye, and as he healed, he began to see the full extent of Melissa's deceptive nature, starting with the misunderstanding with her job at the university.
Melissa told me that she resigned her position. What I later came to find out, she was fired from the university.
Apparently, Melissa had encouraged her lab class to cheat and to leave early. When some of the students reported her, she went on the offensive.
She followed up with making threatening emails to the students to the point where the police became involved. No formal charges were filed, but she was dismissed from her position.
And Jamie couldn't help but wonder if Melissa had lied about other things, too.
I ended up having doubts about whether the whole pregnancy was made up. I wasn't able to go to any of the doctor appointments. Never saw the ultrasound. I only had her word that she miscarried.
As Jamie tried to come to grips with all that had happened, Melissa claimed the shooting was an accident.
How did it go?
I don't know. I wasn't even holding the trigger at first. I'm not really a murdering person.
But when witnesses reported to police that Melissa aimed to kill, her defense shifted to an insanity plea. She described a lifelong battle with mental illness.
I was diagnosed with major depression when I was 12 and I was in a mental institution for 6 weeks. I went in the hospital in November because I'm bipolar and I went manic.
But Melissa's actions after she shot Jamie left her defense full of holes.
She fled the scene. She got rid of evidence. She was rational. She was goal-directed. There's lots of bipolar people out there that don't commit violent crimes of this nature. She knew what she did was wrong.
On June 21st, 2011, just 6 months after her vicious attack, Melissa finally accepted a plea deal to the lesser charges of felonious assault and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison.
I really wasn't happy with the 15 years. I think she uses her mental illness as an excuse for a lot of her actions. She knew exactly what she was doing that day. Her goal that day was to end my life.
Today, after 8 surgeries, Jamie's left eye socket and cheekbone have been successfully reconstructed.
They actually split his skull to go in and try to build up the cheekbones. That's pretty major surgery. He really hung in there. He's very brave.
But the emotional damage has been far worse.
I'm very guarded. I now have...
The first thing investigators noticed was the silence, not the silence of the desert. The silence inside the house. At 6:42 on a warm Arizona morning in 1984, a neighbor stood outside the front door of a small stucco home and listened for movement. Nothing. No television, no footsteps, no running water, no voice calling from inside, only the faint hum of an air conditioner struggling against the heat. The front door was unlocked. That was unusual. The woman who lived there never left it unlocked. Her name was Rachel Morgan. 32 years old, single, quiet, reliable. The kind of woman neighbors described with ordinary words because nothing about her life seemed extraordinary. She worked at a local insurance office. She drove an aging white sedan. She bought groceries every Saturday morning. She called her mother every Sunday night. And then, without warning, she vanished. Her mother had been the first to report her missing. Rachel had failed to make their Sunday call. At first, the family assumed she was busy. Then Monday came. Rachel didn't go to work. Her supervisor called the house. No answer. A coworker drove by. The curtains were closed. The car was gone. By Tuesday morning, police were involved. The first officer entered the house expecting to find evidence of a voluntary disappearance. Instead, he found a scene that made no sense. Rachel's purse was on the kitchen counter. Her driver's license was inside. Her wallet contained cash. Her keys were missing. Her bedroom looked untouched. Clothes remained hanging in the closet. A suitcase sat beneath the bed. Empty. On the kitchen table was a half-finished cup of coffee. The coffee had dried around the edges. Beside it was a newspaper. The date was Sunday. Rachel had been home that morning. That much seemed certain. But where she went afterward remained unknown. The back door was slightly open. Outside, the Arizona ground was dry and hard. Investigators found no clear footprints, no blood, no broken glass, no obvious sign of a struggle, nothing that screamed murder, nothing that explained a disappearance. And then they found the car, 3 miles from Rachel's home, parked behind an abandoned roadside building. The driver's door was locked. The passenger door was unlocked. Rachel's sunglasses were on the dashboard. Her purse was not inside. Neither were the keys. The driver's seat was pushed farther back than Rachel normally kept it. That detail would seem insignificant for years until DNA testing changed the case. But in 1984, DNA evidence was barely entering forensic science. Investigators had fingerprints, blood typing, fiber analysis, hair comparison, handwriting, and whatever witnesses could remember. That was the world detective Michael Harper entered when he was assigned Rachel's disappearance. He was 38, experienced, methodical, not easily impressed. He arrived at the house that afternoon and spent nearly an hour saying nothing. He looked at the coffee, the newspaper, the open back door, the empty space where Rachel's purse should have been. Then he walked into the bedroom. He opened the closet. Rachel's clothing was still there. Winter coats, work dresses, shoes, a photograph of her family. Everything remained. Harper turned toward the bed. A single envelope sat on the pillow. No stamp. No address. Just Rachel's name written across the front. He opened it. Inside was one sentence. I know what you did. Nothing else. Harper read it twice. Then he looked at Rachel's mother. Did she have enemies? Her mother shook her head. Not that I know of. Boyfriend? No. Anyone she was afraid of? Another shake. Then the mother hesitated. There was someone. Harper waited. She wouldn't tell me who. The sentence changed the room. Rachel had been afraid. Her mother remembered a conversation 2 weeks earlier. Rachel had called late at night. Her voice sounded strange. Her mother asked what was wrong. Rachel said someone had been following her. She said the same dark sedan had appeared near her workplace 3 times. She said she thought someone was watching her house. Her mother had urged her to contact police. Rachel refused. She said she didn't have proof. Then she said something her mother never forgot. If anything happens to me, don't believe the first story they tell you. Those words would haunt the family for decades. At the time, investigators had no idea how important they were. They began with the obvious. Rachel's workplace. The insurance office was located in a low building surrounded by dusty parking spaces and mesquite trees. Her co-workers described her as professional, focused, reserved, but one employee remembered something. 3 days before Rachel disappeared, she had stayed late. She had been working on a file involving a local construction company. The file contained unusual payments, large insurance claims, repeated transfers, conflicting signatures. Rachel had apparently noticed something. Her coworker remembered seeing her carrying a thick folder. She asked Rachel what it was. Rachel answered, "Something I shouldn't have found." Then she closed the folder. The coworker laughed. Rachel didn't. The next morning, Rachel arrived early. She asked her supervisor for access to archived records. The request was denied. That afternoon, she argued with someone in a private office. No one heard the entire conversation, but several employees remembered Rachel leaving the room visibly shaken. She walked directly to her car. She looked across the parking lot. Then she looked behind her. Someone was standing near a dark sedan. When Rachel saw the person, she stopped. The figure turned away. Rachel went back inside. She didn't leave work for another hour. Investigators eventually identified the man associated with that sedan. His name was Daniel Reeves. He was a claims investigator who worked with the construction company Rachel had been examining. Reeves denied following her. He denied knowing anything about her disappearance. He said Rachel had been overly suspicious. Harper asked him why. Reeves smiled. "I don't know." That answer bothered Harper. But suspicion was not evidence. Reeves had an alibi. Several co-workers confirmed he had been at a business dinner the night Rachel disappeared. The case moved elsewhere. Police searched the desert. Volunteers walked through dry wash. Helicopters flew over empty stretches of land. Search dogs followed Rachel's scent from her home toward the street, then lost it. Her scent appeared again near the abandoned building where her car had been found, and disappeared. There was no body, no weapon, no confession, only a missing woman and a growing pile of questions. Weeks became months. Months became years. The case eventually went cold. Rachel Morgan became one more name in a file cabinet. Her mother refused to accept that. She was dead. Every year on Rachel's birthday, she called the police department. She asked the same question. Anything new? The answer was always the same. Nothing. No breakthrough. No suspect. No remains. No closure. The desert kept its silence. Then, 37 years later, a forensic technician opened the old evidence box. Inside were items that had been forgotten by almost everyone. Rachel's coffee cup, a scrap of fabric, the envelope, a hair sample, a swab taken from the driver's seat of her abandoned car. At the time, the swab had been useless. The technology could not extract a reliable genetic profile, but forensic science had changed. The sample was tested again. The result came back inconclusive. Then the laboratory tried a newer technique, touch DNA. The amount of biological material was tiny, almost nothing. But it was enough. The computer generated a partial profile. A male profile. Unknown. Investigators entered it into the national database. No match. They tried again. Still nothing. Then they used genetic genealogy. The search produced a distant family connection. One branch led to a man living in Arizona. His name was Daniel Reeves, the same man investigators had questioned in 1984, the same man who had denied following Rachel, the same man who had claimed he barely knew her. He was dead. He had died in 2016, but his DNA had never been tested. Investigators obtained a legal sample from a discarded item belonging to a close relative. The laboratory compared the genetic marker. The probability was overwhelming. The DNA from Rachel's car was connected to Reed, but that was only the beginning. Because the profile did not come from the steering wheel. It did not come from the door. It did not come from the seat where Reeves could have touched the vehicle during ordinary business. It came from a small area beneath the passenger side floor, a place nobody had searched properly in 1984, a place where something had been trapped for decades. Something else, a fragment of fabric, a single dark fiber, and beneath it, biological material that investigators now believed belonged to the person who had been inside Rachel's car shortly before she disappeared. The cold case had suddenly come alive. A forgotten sample, a dead suspect, a hidden DNA profile, and a woman whose family had waited nearly 4 decades for an answer. But when investigators compared the new DNA against Reeves, they discovered something that made the case even more disturbing. The DNA was not a perfect match. It was close, very close, but not his. It belonged to someone genetically related to him, someone from the same family line, someone who had never appeared in the original investigation. And suddenly, the question changed. Who had been sitting beside Rachel Morgan on the last drive of her life? Because the answer was not the man police had suspected in 1984. It was someone they had never questioned. The discovery should have closed the circle. Instead, it broke it open. The DNA recovered from beneath Rachel Morgan's passenger side floor did not belong to Daniel Reed. It belonged to a close male relative. That single fact forced investigators to reopen every assumption made in 1984. The original detectives had focused on Reeves because of the dark sedan, the workplace argument, and Rachel's fear that someone was following her. But if Reeves had never been inside Rachel's car, who had? And why had Rachel's biological evidence been left behind? The forensic laboratory ran the profile again. The result was unchanged. The DNA belonged to a man genetically connected to Reeves. Investigators began reconstructing the Reeves family. There were 3 brothers. Daniel was the oldest. His younger brother, Thomas, had lived in Arizona in 1984. The youngest, Michael, had moved to Nevada. There was also a cousin, Andrew Reeves, who had worked in construction. The first 3 names produced nothing. Then investigators found Andrew. He had died in 2002. His records were sparse, but one detail stopped the investigator. Andrew had worked for the same construction company Rachel had been investigating. The company listed him as a temporary contractor. He had access to the same office complex. He knew the claims department. He knew Rachel. And according to an old payroll record, he had been working near her office during the week she disappeared. Investigators searched his history. No arrest. No conviction. No documented connection to Rachel. No obvious motive. But there was something else. Andrew Reeves had owned a dark blue sedan, a 1979 Chevrolet, the same general description given by Rachel's coworker. The vehicle had been sold shortly after November 1984. Its records disappeared. Investigators contacted the buyer's family. The car had been scrapped in 1991. Nothing remained. But the original registration record did. The vehicle identification number matched a car seen near Rachel's workplace. For 37 years, police had believed the dark sedan belonged to Daniel Reed. It didn't. It belonged to Andrew. A mistake. One letter in an old witness statement had been miswritten. The witness had written, A. Reed. Investigators had assumed Daniel. Nobody corrected it. Nobody checked. A single assumption had redirected the investigation. Now the team had a new suspect. But Andrew had been dead for more than 2 decades. They could not arrest him. They could not interrogate him. They could only reconstruct his life, and that reconstruction became disturbing. Andrew had left Arizona immediately after Rachel disappeared. He moved to Colorado, then Oregon, then California. Every move followed a pattern. Short employment, cash payments, new addresses, no close relationships, no photographs, no social presence. It was as if he had spent his life avoiding attention. Investigators found his employment application from a Colorado construction company. Under emergency contact, he had written, Daniel Reeves. The brothers had remained connected. That mattered. Investigators returned to Daniel's old records. His bank statements from 1984 were incomplete, but one deposit stood out. 4 days after Rachel vanished, Daniel received $7,500 in cash. The source was unknown. The amount was large for the time. The deposit was followed by another, $3,200. Then Daniel paid off a personal debt. Investigators checked Andrew's account. He had made a cash withdrawal of exactly $7,500 2 days earlier. The money trail was suddenly visible. Andrew had given Daniel money. Why? Investigators searched the old case file. There was no mention of Andrew. Not one interview. Not one statement. Not one photograph. Nothing. A man connected to the construction company. A relative of the original suspect. The owner of the dark sedan. A person whose DNA was now connected to Rachel's car, and police had never questioned him. But the story still had a missing piece. Why would Andrew target Rachel? The answer appeared in the insurance records. Rachel had discovered something much larger than fraudulent claims. The construction company had been submitting false damage reports. But the money was not simply being stolen. It was being redirected through a network of shell businesses. One of those businesses was connected to Andrew Reed, a company called Desert Crown Material. On paper, it sold construction supplies. In reality, it barely existed. The company had no warehouse, no delivery trucks, no regular employee, yet thousands of dollars moved through its account. Rachel had discovered the payments. She had begun copying documents, and someone realized she had seen them. The investigation now suggested that Rachel had not been targeted because of a personal dispute. She had been targeted because she had found money that connected businessmen, contractors, insurance employees, and possibly people inside local government. The detectives returned to Rachel's original debt. The office had been renovated decades ago. The old records were gone, but the company had preserved archived microfilm. Investigators searched the records from October and November 1984. They found Rachel's name repeatedly. She had accessed files connected to Desert Crown. Then, on November 2nd, she accessed a restricted file. The system log showed the time, 5:18 p.m., 24 hours before her disappearance. Someone else accessed the same file 12 minutes later. Andrew Reeves. That was the first direct evidence placing him near Rachel's investigation. But it became stranger. The next day, Rachel made a telephone call. The number belonged to Andrew's office. The call lasted 4 minutes. No recording existed. But Rachel wrote something in her notebook afterward. The notebook had been recovered from her home in 1984. Investigators had examined it. They had found nothing significant. Now, with new information, they looked again. One page contained several numbers, dates, dollar amounts, initials, and one sentence. He says he can make it disappear. The handwriting was Rachel's. Below it was a name, R. Andrew Reeves. The case was becoming darker, but there was still no proof he had killed her. He could have been involved in the fraud. He could have threatened Rachel. He could have been inside her car. But what happened after that? Investigators returned to the abandoned building where Rachel's sedan had been found. The building was gone. A highway now ran through the area, but old photographs showed the layout. Rachel's car had been parked beside a service road. The passenger door was unlocked. The driver's door was locked. That meant someone had entered through the passenger side. The DNA had been recovered beneath the passenger mat. Investigators wondered whether Andrew had been sitting there, but the driver's seat had been moved. Someone taller than Rachel had driven the car. Andrew was 6'2". Rachel was 5'4". The seat position suddenly made sense. Someone had driven her car. But why abandon it? Because Rachel may not have been inside anymore. Investigators searched old tow records. The car had been found at 6:15 a.m. The police arrived at 6:42, but another vehicle had been seen nearby, a dark pickup. A witness remembered it. The witness was an elderly man who had been ignored in 1984 because he could not identify the driver. Now investigators located his old statement. It contained one detail. The pickup had a broken left taillight. Investigators checked Andrew's vehicles. His truck had a broken left taillight and a repair bill dated November 5th, SIL 1984, 2 days after Rachel vanished. The bill stated, "Replace left rear assembly." The evidence was no longer circumstantial in isolation. It was forming a chain. Andrew knew Rachel. Andrew knew about the financial records. Andrew owned the dark sedan. Andrew had accessed the same restricted file. Andrew's DNA was inside Rachel's car. Andrew owned a pickup with a broken left taillight, and he left Arizona shortly after Rachel disappeared. But investigators still needed the most important answer. Where had Andrew taken her? The original search area had been enormous. Desert, canals, dry riverbeds, abandoned mines, remote roads, too much land, too little evidence. Then a retired highway worker came forward. He had seen something on November 4th, SIL 1984, a white sedan parked near a dirt road outside the city. Not Rachel's car, another vehicle. But beside it was a woman. The worker remembered because she was barefoot. She appeared frightened. She was talking to a man near a pickup. He could not identify the woman. He had never reported it. But when investigators showed him Rachel's photograph, he became silent. Then he pointed. "That's her." Mercer asked how certain he was. The man looked at the photograph for nearly a minute. Her face was thinner. "But you recognize her?" "Yes." "What happened?" The witness described the scene. The woman was standing near the passenger side of the pickup. The man was holding her arm. She appeared to be arguing. Then another vehicle approached. The man pushed her into the pickup. The second vehicle drove away. The witness remembered the pickup's broken left taillight. But there was something else. He remembered the man saying one sentence, "Your mother doesn't know where you are." That detail terrified investigators, because Rachel's mother had reported receiving a strange telephone call on November 4th. The caller said nothing. She only heard breathing. Then the line went dead. The call had been traced to a payphone. The location was less than 3 miles from where the highway worker had seen the woman. Rachel may have still been alive. That possibility had been buried for decades. The case was no longer simply about a disappearance from a house. Rachel had been transported. She had been seen alive, and someone had threatened her mother. Investigators searched Andrew's old property records. He had owned a small desert cabin outside Tucson. The property was sold in 1986. The new owner had demolished the cabin years later, but the foundation remained. A search team scanned the soil. Nothing. Then a forensic dog alerted near the rear wall. Investigators dug. They found a metal toolbox. Inside were old photographs, receipts, a key, and a cassette. The cassette was labeled R.M. Rachel Morgan. The recording was badly damaged, but modern restoration recovered several fragments. Rachel's voice was unmistakable. She sounded exhausted. "I told you I don't have it." A man answered. "Then tell me where it is." "I destroyed it." "No." "I did." "You're lying." A chair scraped. Rachel cried out. Then she said something that changed the entire investigation. "The copy isn't here." The man asked, "Where?" Rachel whispered, "Somewhere you'll never look." Then the tape cut out. Mercer listened again. There was another sound. A clock. Ticking. Slowly. Then a metallic door slammed. The recording ended. Investigators examined the cabin floor plan. There had been a basement. A small storage room. Room B. Number 17. B17. The same code that had appeared in Rachel's old records. The same type of marking found in the Tennessee case files? Here, it meant something else. It was a storage designation, and the cabin had one. B-17. Investigators opened the old foundation. Beneath the concrete floor was a sealed compartment. Inside was a plastic bag. The bag contained a woman's hairbrush. Rachel's family identified it. But there was no body, no blood, no weapon, only the brush, and one photograph. Rachel standing beside the cabin, alive. The date was November 6th, Sill, 1984, 3 days after her disappearance. She was bruised. Her hair was messy, but she was alive. Someone had taken the photograph. On the back was a message. She knows where the money went. Investigators looked at one another. The question was no longer whether Rachel had been kidnapped. She had. The question was how long she had survived and who had taken the photograph, because whoever held that camera had been close enough to Rachel to know exactly what she looked like. The DNA from the car pointed to Andrew Reed. The financial records pointed toward a larger conspiracy. The cabin suggested Rachel had been held alive for days, and the photograph suggested someone had documented her captivity. But then forensic analysts noticed something strange. A second person was visible in the photograph. Only part of a hand appeared at the edge of the frame. A ring. A distinctive ring. Investigators enlarged it. The ring belonged to Daniel Reeves, the original suspect, the brother, the man who had spent years insisting he barely knew Rachel, the man who had died in 2016. Now the DNA, the money, the cabin, and the photograph were connecting two brothers to the disappearance, and the most terrifying possibility was becoming impossible to ignore. Rachel had not been taken by one man. She had been passed between them. And somewhere in the missing days between November 3rd and November 7th, something had happened that neither brother ever confessed, something that would remain hidden until investigators found one final piece of evidence buried beneath the cabin floor, a piece of fabric, dark blue, with a tiny stitched emblem, the same emblem worn by employees of the construction company Rachel had been investigating, and sewn into the fabric was a single strand of hair. Not Rachel's, not Andrew's, not Daniel's. A third male profile, a man nobody had ever considered, a man whose identity would turn the entire 1984 investigation upside down. The third DNA profile should have been impossible. For 37 years, investigators had believed the case revolved around two brothers, Andrew Reeves, Daniel Reeves. Now the laboratory had identified biological material belonging to a third man, a man who had never appeared in Rachel Morgan's original case file. The hair recovered from the blue fabric contained enough genetic material for a partial profile. The profile was male. It did not match Andrew. It did not match Daniel. It did not match anyone in the national database. But when investigators ran the profile through genealogical software, the result produced a distant connection. One family, one surname, and one name that immediately drew attention: Frank Holloway. In 1984, Holloway had been 36 years old. He worked as a security supervisor for the same construction company Rachel had been investigating. He had access to the company's offices. He had access to its vehicles. He knew the warehouse. He knew the executives. And he had signed Rachel's building access report the night before she disappeared. But there was a problem. Holloway had told investigators in 1984 that he had never seen Rachel after 5 p.m. The old interview contained his statement. He claimed he left work at 4:45. He drove directly home. He spent the evening with his wife. His wife confirmed the story. For decades, nobody questioned it. Now investigators looked at the statement differently. Holloway had not merely worked for the company. He had been responsible for security cameras, and Rachel's office had been inside the one building where the surveillance system had mysteriously failed the night she disappeared. The original report called it an electrical malfunction. The repair invoice said something different. Manual shutdown. Someone had turned the system off. The timestamp was 5:03 p.m. Rachel left work at 5:41. For 38 minutes, the cameras were dead. That was enough time for someone to enter the building enough time to wait. Enough time to follow Rachel. Enough time to make sure nobody saw what happened next. Mercer requested Holloway's employment records. His personnel file was missing. Not damaged. Not incomplete. Missing. Again, someone had removed evidence. The investigators began searching outside sources, tax records, property records, old vehicle registrations, court documents. They discovered Holloway had purchased a second vehicle in November 1984, a white van, cash purchase, no loan, no insurance record until several weeks later. The van disappeared from the registration database in 1986, sold to an unknown buyer. The investigators traced the vehicle identification number. It had been scrapped in 1993, but the junkyard still had one photograph. The van was heavily damaged. Its rear doors were covered with a dark blue fabric lining, the same color as the fabric recovered from the cab. That did not prove Holloway had transported Rachel, but it placed him inside the growing circle. And then came the discovery that changed the meaning of the DNA. The genetic profile from the hair did not simply point to Holloway. It was a direct familial match. The laboratory estimated that the man was highly likely to be a close biological relative of Frank Holloway. Investigators obtained DNA from Holloway's surviving son. The result was not a direct match, but the genetic relationship was consistent. The laboratory concluded that the unknown profile could belong to Holloway himself. There was no doubt left. The hair belonged to Frank Holloway. Now the timeline became clear. Rachel had been investigating fraudulent claims. Andrew Reeves had access to the money network. Daniel Reeves was connected to the payments. Frank Holloway controlled building security. And all three men had links to the same construction company. The question was no longer whether they knew one another. They did. The question was what they had done. Investigators returned to the old financial records. A payment appeared again and again. $12,000. $12,000. $12,000. Every payment came from the same shell company. Every payment went to a different person. Andrew, Daniel, Holloway. Then, a fourth payment. The recipient was a police officer. The name had been blacked out on the original copy. Modern scanning recovered the impression beneath the ink. Frank Dalton, the retired detective who had admitted destroying evidence. The man who had warned Mercer that Pike was more dangerous than he understood. The man who had disappeared from his home during the reopened investigation. Suddenly, the conspiracy had a structure. Money moved from the construction company. The Reeves brothers handled transportation and financial operation. Holloway controlled access and surveillance. Dalton controlled the investigation. Rachel had discovered the system, and someone decided she had to disappear. But investigators still needed the most important evidence, proof that Rachel had been inside the cabin. They already had her photograph, her hairbrush, the blue fabric, her DNA, but none of it explained what happened afterward. The cabin was searched again. This time, forensic teams removed every section of the remaining foundation. They found a narrow cavity beneath the western wall. Inside was a rusted metal container. The container had been wrapped in plastic. The plastic had deteriorated, but the contents were preserved. A cassette, a notebook, and a small silver necklace. Rachel's mother identified the necklace immediately. Rachel had worn it since college. The notebook contained only 23 pages. Most were blank. Several pages had been torn out, but one page remained. Rachel had written a list of names: Andrew Reeves, Daniel Reeves, Frank Holloway, Frank Dalton. Then one more name: Charles Vane. Mercer had never heard it. The name did not appear anywhere in the original investigation. He searched. Charles Vane had been the owner of the construction company, the company's president, the man Rachel had been investigating. He had died in 1990, cancer. At the time, his death had been considered unrelated, but the notebook suggested otherwise. Rachel had written beneath his name, "He knows everything." Then another sentence: "He told them to scare me." Mercer read it again. Not kill. Scare. Rachel believed someone had originally intended to intimidate her. Something had gone wrong. Perhaps the kidnapping was never supposed to happen. Perhaps Rachel resisted. Perhaps she threatened to expose everything. The cassette inside the metal container provided another piece. The recording began with Rachel breathing heavily. "You're recording this?" A male voice answered. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I want proof." "Proof of what?" "That you understand the consequences." Rachel laughed bitterly. "You think this will scare me?" The man said nothing. Then Rachel spoke again. "You stole millions." The voice became angry. "You don't know what you're talking about. I have the records. You have copies. I have originals." A chair moved. Then Rachel whispered, "If I disappear, they're going public." The man asked, "Where are they?" Rachel refused to answer. The recording ended. The voice had been distorted, but investigators believed it belonged to Charles Vane. If true, the company owner had personally confronted Rachel, but the recording raised another question. Why was it made? Who had recorded it? And why had the tape survived? Forensic specialists examined the cassette. The recording device had been inexpensive, but a second audio layer existed beneath the conversation. A background channel. A radio broadcast. The broadcast date could be determined. November 6th. Sill 1984. That meant Rachel was alive on November 6th, 3 days after her disappearance. And the cabin photograph had been taken the same day. The case was no longer a simple cold case. It was a prolonged captivity. Rachel had survived for days, perhaps longer. The investigators now knew she had been alive at least until November 6th. The next question became November 7th, the day she vanished from every known record, the day her trail ended. Investigators searched transportation records, bus stations, gas stations, motels, hospitals. Nothing. Then they found a truck stop receipt. November 7th, 11:18 p.m. The receipt was for coffee, gasoline, and a meal. The vehicle listed was a white van, the same vehicle registered to Holloway. The location was more than 70 miles from the cabin. A waitress remembered the driver. She described him as nervous. He had been alone. But she remembered something else. There had been a woman in the passenger seat. She never saw the woman's face. The woman was lying down. The waitress assumed she was sleeping, but the driver told her, "She's sick." The waitress remembered the sentence because the woman never moved. Investigators searched the truck stop's old maintenance records. One mechanic had written a note on the receipt, "Rear door won't lock." That detail mattered. The van's rear doors had been damaged. If Rachel had been transported inside, investigators needed to know where the vehicle went. The van's route was reconstructed. It traveled east, then north, then disappeared from known record. But a toll station captured the license plate. The timestamp was 1078, November 8th. The van was leaving Arizona. Holloway was driving, and he was not alone. The investigation now had a new timeline. Rachel disappeared. She was taken to the cabin. She remained alive. She was photographed. She was recorded. Then she was transported away. But where? The answer appeared in a letter Holloway had written to his brother in 1985. It had never been sent. The envelope was found inside an old storage box. The message contained only 3 lines. "I did what you asked. She's gone. Nobody will find her in the river." Mercer read the final sentence twice. The river. That was the first direct reference to Rachel's possible final location. Investigators searched waterways connected to Holloway's route. One river stood out, the Gila. Its remote stretches were difficult to search. In 1984, the water level had been unusually high. Anything dropped there could have been carried miles downstream. Divers entered the water. They found old vehicles, barrels, scrap metal, animal remains, but no human remains. Then one diver discovered something beneath a submerged tree, a rusted metal box. Inside was a woman's wristwatch. The watch had stopped at 2:17. Rachel's mother identified it. It had belonged to her daughter. The watch had been purchased in 1981. The serial number matched. The investigators stared at it. The time was 2:17, not 6:15, not 6:42, not midnight. to 17. Another time. Another hidden marker. The watch had stopped because its internal mechanism had been damaged, but the damage was consistent with a hard impact. Rachel had been wearing it when something happened. The investigators searched the riverbank. They found a small section of fabric caught beneath a rock, dark blue, the same material found at the cabin. Then they found a button, a brass security company button, Frank Holloway's employer. The evidence was tightening, but no body had been recovered. And without a body, prosecutors faced a difficult case. The investigators needed to prove what happened to Rachel. They needed a witness, someone alive, someone willing to talk. Then a name appeared in an old Arizona telephone directory, Samuel Price. In 1984, Price had worked as a night dispatcher for the construction company. His job required him to log every vehicle entering and leaving the company's facility. He had been interviewed once. His statement was only for lying. He claimed he remembered nothing unusual, but when investigators found him decades later, he told a different story. He had remembered everything. He had simply been afraid. Price admitted seeing Holloway's white van leave the company property on November 7th. He said Andrew Reeves was driving. Daniel Reeves was in the passenger seat, and in the back of the van he heard someone pounding against the metal wall. Price said he asked what was happening. Andrew looked at him, then said, "Don't ask." Price never did, but he remembered hearing a woman's voice. 3 words, "Please help me." That sentence changed the case. Rachel had been alive. She had been inside the van, and at least 3 men knew it. Price had stayed silent for 37 years, until now. Investigators asked him where the van went. He said he followed it from a distance. The van headed toward the river, then stopped near an old service road. Price saw Holloway arrive in another vehicle. He saw the men open the rear door. Then he saw Rachel. She was standing, barely. Her hands appeared to be tied. Price said she looked directly at him. For 1 second, their eyes met. Then Holloway saw the second vehicle. He shouted. Price drove away. He never looked back. But before he left, he heard one final sentence. Andrew Reeves said, "She knows about Vane." And that name became the center of the reopened investigation. Because Charles Vane was dead. Andrew was dead. Daniel was dead. Holloway was dead. Dalton was missing. And Rachel Morgan was still missing. 4 men connected to the case could no longer be questioned. One remained, Frank Dalton. And somewhere in his possession might be the final record of what happened to Rachel. The investigators returned to his abandoned house. They searched the basement again. Behind a false wall, they found a steel cabinet. Inside were original police reports, photographs, witness statements, and one cassette labeled with Rachel's name. The recording began with Dalton's voice. He sounded frightened. Then came another voice, Charles Vane. The conversation was short, but one sentence was unmistakable. "Make sure the girl never reaches the police." Dalton answered, "What if she talks?" Vane replied, "Then make sure nobody believes her." The recording ended. For the first time, investigators had direct evidence that the original investigation had been manipulated. Rachel had not simply disappeared. Someone had worked to erase her. Someone had controlled the evidence. Someone had protected the men connected to her disappearance, and buried inside the final police file was one handwritten note. Not from Rachel, not from Dalton, not from Vane. It was signed only with a single initial, A. The message contained 6 words. "She was alive when I left." The handwriting matched Andrew Reed. The cold case had just become something far more disturbing. The investigators now knew Rachel had survived for days. They knew she had been transported toward the river. They knew multiple men had been involved. They knew evidence had been destroyed. But they still did not know what happened after Andrew walked away. And the answer was hidden in the one place nobody had searched in 1984, the riverbank. Not the water, the ground above it. Beneath an old concrete drainage channel, investigators found a rectangular patch of soil that had been disturbed decades earlier. A forensic dog alerted. The team began digging. At first, they found nothing. Then the shovel struck metal, a small box. Inside was a cassette recorder, and on the recorder, beneath 37 years of static, was Rachel's voice. She was crying. She was whispering. And just before the tape ended, she said a name. Not Andrew, not Daniel, not Holloway, not Vane, not Dalton. A completely different name. A name belonging to the person investigators had never suspected. A name that would finally explain why Rachel Morgan disappeared without a trace. The name on the tape was almost impossible to hear. Static swallowed the first syllable. Whined, distorted the second. Then Rachel whispered it again. This time the recording was clear enough. Elliot. Mercer stopped the tape. The room went silent. There was no Elliot in the original case file. No Elliot in Rachel's workplace records. No Elliot among the Reeves family. No Elliot connected to the construction company. The name had never appeared in any witness statement. It was as if Rachel had whispered the name into the darkness, knowing nobody would hear it. But somebody had, and that somebody had kept the tape hidden for 37 years. Investigators began searching every record connected to Rachel. They found an Elliot Shaw, 39 years old in 1984, a freelance photographer. He had occasionally worked for the construction company documenting property damage for insurance claim. His name appeared on only 3 invoices, then disappeared. But one photograph changed everything. It showed Rachel standing outside the insurance office, taken 2 weeks before her disappearance. The photographer was Elliot Shaw. He had been watching her. At first, investigators assumed he had simply been doing his job. Then they examined the negatives. There were 14 photographs. The first showed the building. The second showed the parking lot. The third showed Rachel leaving work. The remaining 11 showed Rachel, not the building, not the property. Rachel, walking, driving, entering her home, standing beside her mother. The photographs were not professional documentation. They were surveillance. Someone had been tracking her, and Elliot Shaw had been holding the camera. Investigators searched Shaw's history. He had lived in Arizona until 1985. Then he moved to New Mexico, then Colorado, then disappeared. His death certificate showed he died in 2008. Cause of death listed as heart failure. No criminal history, no arrest, no known connection to Rachel. But his old apartment yielded a strange discovery. A box of photographs. Hundreds. Most unrelated. But one envelope was marked with a single date, November 1984. Inside were photographs of Rachel. The last photograph had been taken at night. Rachel was standing outside a white van. Her wrists appeared to be tied. And beside her stood Andrew Reed. The photograph was dated November 7th. The same night investigators believed she was transported toward the river. But there was another person in the image. A man standing behind the van. His face was partially hidden. Mercer enlarged the photograph. The man's clothing was familiar. Dark jacket. Security badge. Frank Holloway. The photograph confirmed all 3 men were together. Andrew, Holloway, Rachel. But Elliot had taken the photograph. That meant Elliot was there too. 4 men, 1 woman, 1 van, and 1 night that had remained hidden for decades. Investigators searched Shaw's apartment records again. His former landlord remembered something. Shaw had once kept a locked basement room. The landlord had never been allowed inside. After Shaw died, the room was cleared by his family. But 1 item remained. A metal cabinet. The landlord had thrown it away. Investigators tracked the disposal company. The cabinet had been destroyed. But before destruction, someone had photographed its content. The disposal company kept digital records. Among the photographs was a folder. Inside were handwritten notes. The notes appeared to be Shaw. One sentence read, "Vane wants the girl frightened, not dead." Another, "Andrew lost control." Another, "Dalton knows." Then a final line, "If anything happens, the tape goes to the river." Mercer immediately returned to the evidence. The tape had been found near the river. Shaw had hidden it there. But why? Was he trying to protect Rachel? Or was he documenting what happened? The answer came from the rest of the note. Shaw had been hired by Charles Vane, not as a photographer, as an investigator. Vane wanted to know whether Rachel had copied company records. Shaw followed her, photographed her, recorded her conversations. But somewhere along the way, he began to regret what he was doing. He wrote, "She knows they are following her. Then, she asked me why. Then, I lied." The notes stopped for several days. Then the next entry was dated November 3rd. They took her. The sentence was underlined. Another line followed. "I saw Andrew put her in the van." Mercer stared at the page. Shaw had witnessed the abduction, but he had not stopped it. Instead, he followed them. He photographed the cabin. He recorded conversations. He documented the evidence. Why? Perhaps he wanted leverage. Perhaps he wanted protection. Perhaps he was afraid. Then investigators found a second tape. This one was hidden inside a camera case. The audio began with a door closing. Rachel was crying. Andrew's voice was angry. "You should have listened." Rachel answered, "I trusted you." Andrew said nothing. Then Holloway entered. "Where's the ledger?" Rachel replied, "You're never getting it." Holloway struck the table. "Where is it?" Rachel screamed. Then another voice appeared. "Elliot, enough." Everyone went silent. Elliot continued, "She's not going to tell you." Andrew laughed. "Then what do you suggest?" Elliot answered, "Let her go." The tape stopped. Mercer replayed it. Elliot had been inside the cabin. He had tried to stop them. That explained why Rachel had said his name, but it also raised another question. Why hadn't he rescued her? The answer appeared on the next tape. Elliot was speaking to someone outside the cabin. The voice was Charles Vane. "You have one job." Elliot replied, "I've done it." "Then finish it." "She'll die." "That's not your concern." Elliot paused, then said, "I'm done." Vane laughed. "You think you can walk away?" The recording ended. Elliot had tried, but the men surrounding Rachel were not simply criminals. They had money, connections, influence, and someone inside law enforcement. Elliot had known he could not confront them directly, so he created a backup. The tapes, the photographs, the notes. He hid everything. Then he disappeared. But the question remained. What happened to Rachel? The final photographs from November 7th showed her being moved. The tape suggested she was alive. The witness saw her near the river. The DNA linked the men to the vehicle, but there was no evidence of her final fate. Then, forensic analysts discovered something hidden in one photograph. The riverbank, the white van, Rachel, Andrew, Holloway, Elliot. Behind them was a road sign, only partially visible. The letters read, Mesa. Investigators searched old map. One location matched. Mesa Verde Road, a remote service road leading toward an abandoned mining site. The road had been closed in 1987. In 1984, it was still accessible. Search teams went there. The area was enormous. Old mine shafts, collapsed tunnels, dry ravines, abandoned equipment. They searched for 3 days. Nothing. On the 4th day, a technician noticed something beneath a pile of rock. A metal clasp, then another, then a small piece of fabric. Dark blue. Rachel's coat had been dark blue. The laboratory tested the fabric. It contained Rachel's DNA, but there were no remains. Instead, investigators found tire tracks preserved beneath layers of sediment. The track pattern matched the white van. A second set matched Andrew's pickup. Both vehicles had been there, but the evidence suggested the vehicles had left separately. One traveled north, one traveled south. Investigators reconstructed the route. Andrew drove south toward Mexico. Holloway drove north. Elliot drove west. 3 men, 3 directions, 1 missing woman. Then came the breakthrough. A retired gas station owner remembered seeing a woman in November 1984. She arrived alone. She was wearing a blue coat. She asked for water. She looked frightened. The owner asked whether she needed police. She said, no. Then she asked where the nearest bus station was. The owner gave her directions. Before leaving, the woman asked for a piece of paper. She wrote something down. The owner kept it. For 37 years. He had assumed it was meaningless. The paper contained one name, Daniel Mercer. Mercer stared at his own name. Rachel had written it. But why? She had never met him. At least, not according to the official records. Then investigators discovered an overlooked interview. 3 days before Rachel disappeared, she had visited the police station. She had asked to speak with Detective Mercer. The meeting was never entered into the main case file. Mercer's supervisor had handled it. The notes were brief. Rachel had told Mercer she believed someone was following her. She had shown him documents. She had asked for protection. Mercer had advised her to return the next day. She never did. The meeting had been erased from the official timeline. Mercer himself had forgotten. 37 years later, the memory returned in fragments. A woman. A folder. Fear in her eyes. And one sentence. If I disappear, don't trust the people who say I left willingly. Mercer realized something. Rachel had trusted him. She had written his name because she believed he might eventually understand. But why had she never contacted him again? The answer came from the police records. Mercer's supervisor had reassigned the case before it officially began. Frank Dalton, the same man who later destroyed evidence. Dalton had intercepted Rachel's original complaint. He had kept it out of the system. He had prevented Mercer from knowing how serious the threat was. Rachel had been trying to warn the police. The police had failed her. Not because they had no evidence, because someone made sure they never saw it. The reopened investigation now turned toward Dalton. His disappearance became urgent. Search teams found his abandoned vehicle near a rural highway. Inside was a notebook. Most pages had been torn out. One remained. Dalton had written. Vane ordered it. Then, Andrew carried it out. Then, Holloway drove. Then, Elliot watched. The final line was different. I was supposed to make sure she stayed missing. Mercer stared at the sentence. Dalton had not simply interfered with the investigation. He had been assigned a task. Keep Rachel missing. But there was another line beneath it. Written later. Different ink. Different handwriting. She didn't stay missing. Mercer immediately sent the handwriting to the laboratory. It was Rachel's. The sentence was dated November 12, Sill, 1984, 5 days after the river incident. Rachel had written it herself. She was alive, and she was telling someone that she had escaped. The next page had been torn away, but the indentation revealed several words. I am going to. Then, Phoenix. Mercer ordered investigators to search Phoenix records. Bus stations, hospitals, shelters, hotels, employment offices. Nothing. Then an old newspaper archive revealed a photograph. A charity event. November 15th, Sill, 1984. A young woman stood in the background. Her face was turned toward the camera. The photograph was blurry, but the clothing was unmistakable. Blue coat. Rachel's coat. And beside her was a man. Not Andrew. Not Holloway. Not Elliot. A stranger. The caption identified him as a volunteer at the shelter. His name was Peter Caldwell. Caldwell had disappeared from Arizona shortly after the event. He had moved to Oregon. He had no criminal history. But investigators found something strange. His birth records were incomplete. His original surname had been different. He had changed his identity in 1983, and his old surname was one Rachel had written in her notebook. Caldwell. Mercer looked at the page again. Rachel had not written Peter Caldwell. She had written only C, a clue hidden in plain sight. Investigators located Peter Caldwell. He was 81, living in Oregon. When Mercer showed him Rachel's photograph, Caldwell began to cry. Then he said 4 words. She was my sister. Mercer froze. Rachel Morgan had never had a brother. Her family had never mentioned a brother. But Caldwell insisted. He said Rachel had been born under another name. Her family had changed her identity as a child after a violent custody dispute. Rachel Morgan was not her original name, and the people who had been hunting her in 1984 may not have been hunting an insurance employee at all. They may have been hunting the woman she had been before. Caldwell reached into a drawer. He removed a photograph. A much younger Rachel. Beside her stood a man, their father, a man who had been connected to Charles Vane decades before. Caldwell looked at Mercer, then whispered. Vane knew who she really was. The room fell silent. The fraud investigation had been only one layer. Rachel had discovered something else. Something connected her family to Vane, something buried years earlier. And according to Caldwell, Rachel had been trying to uncover it shortly before she disappeared. Mercer asked what it was. Caldwell shook his head. I never told her. Told her what? That our father didn't die by accident. Mercer stared at him. Caldwell opened another file. Inside was a newspaper clipping. A death notice. Rachel's father had died in 1978. Official cause, industrial accident. But Caldwell claimed it was murder, and the company responsible had been owned by Charles Vane. Mercer looked at the photograph. Suddenly, the case was no longer only about stolen insurance money. It was about a death 6 years earlier, a family secret, a company empire, and a woman who had discovered that the disappearance of her father and her own disappearance were connected. Caldwell leaned closer. There was one thing Rachel was afraid of. What? He looked at Mercer. She found the original report. Which report? The report proving our father was murdered. Mercer felt the weight of the case shift again. Rachel had not simply uncovered fraud. She had uncovered a killing. And someone had spent years making sure that report never surfaced. But Caldwell had one final piece of information. He said Rachel had mailed him something the night before she disappeared. He had never opened it. He had been too afraid. Mercer asked where it was. Caldwell pointed toward a locked box. Inside was a photograph, a key, and a handwritten note. The note contained one sentence. If they come for me, the truth is under the old mine. Mercer looked at the map. The abandoned mine. The same area where Rachel's coat had been found. The same road shown in the photograph. The same place investigators had searched. But beneath the old mine was a tunnel system. And according to Caldwell, Rachel knew about it, because their father had worked there. The investigators returned to the mine. This time they went underground. The tunnel descended beneath the desert, hundreds of feet. Then the passage narrowed. A forensic technician found fresh scratches on the rock, not fresh in days, fresh in decades. Someone had dragged something through the tunnel. They followed the marks. At the end was a sealed steel door. The door had a small triangular lock. The key from Caldwell's box fit perfectly. Mercer turned it. The lock opened. Inside was a room untouched since 1984. A chair, a table, a cassette recorder. And on the wall, written in faded black ink, were 3 words. Rachel was here. Then Mercer noticed something on the floor. A woman's shoe. Beside it was a blood-stained piece of cloth. And beneath the cloth was a photograph. The photograph showed Rachel, alive, sitting in the room, looking directly into the camera. On the back, she had written, "If you found this, I escaped." Mercer stared at the image. Then he turned it over. There was one more sentence. "But someone followed me." And below it was a name that investigators had never heard before, a name that belonged to the man who had helped Rachel escape, and the person who knew where she went next. The name written beneath Rachel's final sentence was Ethan Cole. For 37 years, that name had existed nowhere in the case. No police report, no witness statement, no insurance file, no newspaper article, nothing. Yet Rachel had written it herself. Ethan Cole. He helped me. Mercer stared at the words until the letters seemed to blur. If Ethan had helped Rachel escape the mine, then he was the first person connected to the case who might have seen her alive after November 1984. He might know where she went. He might know who was chasing her. And he might know why she never came home. Investigators began searching. The first records appeared in Arizona. Ethan Cole had been 27 in 1984. He worked as a mechanic. He rented a small apartment. He had no criminal record. He had never worked for the construction company. He had no known relationship with Charles Vane. But there was one connection. His father had worked at the same mine where Rachel's father died. The mine had closed after the accident. Officially, the closure had nothing to do with the death, but Ethan's father had reportedly claimed the accident was staged. He believed someone had deliberately caused the equipment failure. The claim was never investigated. Ethan was 15 when his father died. His family believed the death had been ruled accidental. Years later, Ethan reportedly became obsessed with proving otherwise. That brought him into contact with Rachel. Investigators found a library card issued in Rachel's name. On the back was a handwritten telephone number. The number belonged to Ethan Cole. The card had been recovered from Rachel's house in 1984. Detectives had never understood its significance. Now it became a direct link. Rachel knew Ethan. Ethan knew about the mine, and both may have known the same secret. Investigators searched Ethan's old apartment records. The apartment had been demolished in 1999, but the former landlord remembered him. He described Ethan as quiet, always looking over his shoulder. The landlord remembered one strange night in November 1984. Ethan returned home after midnight. He was covered in dirt. His hands were bleeding. He carried a woman's coat. The landlord asked what happened. Ethan said, "Don't ask me." The next morning, he moved out. He left behind almost everything: books, furniture, clothing, a radio, and a photograph. The landlord had kept the photograph. It showed Ethan standing beside a woman, Rachel, alive. The photograph was taken on November 12th, 9 days after she disappeared. That changed the entire timeline. Rachel had survived the river. She had reached the mine. She had escaped. And she had been with Ethan at least 9 days after her disappearance. But why did Ethan never come forward? Investigators traced him to California, then Nevada, then Washington. Everywhere he went, he used the same name. But in 1996, he disappeared completely. No bank accounts, no driver's license, no employment records, no medical records. It was as if Ethan Cole had ceased to exist. Then investigators found a death certificate, not under Ethan Cole, under Ethan Charles. The man had died in 2019 in rural Oregon. The cause was listed as complications from a stroke. He had lived alone, no spouse, no children, no close relatives. But the county had preserved his belongings. A box was still stored in an evidence room because nobody had claimed it. Investigators opened it. Inside were dozens of photographs. Most were landscapes, mountains, desert roads, old buildings. Then they found Rachel. Photograph after photograph. Rachel walking. Rachel sitting at a bus station. Rachel entering a motel. Rachel standing beside Ethan. Rachel looking directly into the camera. She had survived. Not for days. For months. Possibly years. The last photograph showed her in a small town in Oregon. The date was 1987. Rachel was older. Her hair was shorter. She looked healthier. But she was not smiling. On the back of the photograph was a sentence. "He still knows where I am." Investigators searched Ethan's note. One notebook contained a timeline. November 3rd. Rachel taken. November 6th. Cabin. November 7th. River. November 8th. Mine. November 12th. Escape. November 14th. Phoenix. November 19th. New identity. The final line read, December 1984. She decided to disappear. Rachel had not simply been missing. She had chosen to disappear after escaping. But she had been afraid. Afraid that the people who had kidnapped her would find her. And Ethan had helped her. The investigators now had a crucial question. Why did Rachel never contact her mother? The answer appeared in another note. She believes they will kill her family. That matched Rachel's earlier recording. She believed someone was watching her mother. She believed the police had been compromised. She believed returning home would put everyone at risk. For Rachel, disappearing may have been the only way to keep her family alive. But there was another mystery. Why did she continue leaving clues? Why photographs? Why tapes? Why notes? Because she wanted someone to know the truth. She simply did not want to be found. Ethan had apparently agreed to help her, but his notes revealed something dark. She doesn't trust me anymore. Then, she thinks I betrayed her. Then, I didn't. The entries stopped. Investigators searched the photographs for clues. One image showed Rachel standing outside a bus station. Another showed her entering a small motel. The third showed a man watching her from across the street. His face was barely visible, but the clothing was familiar. Dark jacket, silver ring. Daniel Reeves, the dead suspect. The man who had supposedly disappeared from the case years earlier. Investigators initially thought it was impossible. Then they compared the photograph with older images. The face was consistent. Daniel had followed Rachel, even after the mine, even after the river. He had continued searching, and Rachel knew it. The investigators examined every photograph taken after November 12th. A pattern emerged. Whenever Rachel moved, Daniel appeared. Phoenix, Flagstaff, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Denver. The photographs formed a trail across the American Southwest. Ethan had documented them, but someone else was documenting Ethan. Someone was following both of them. The photographs were not simply evidence of Rachel's movements. They were evidence of a hunt, a long, quiet pursuit. Then investigators found a photograph dated January 1985. Rachel was standing beside a payphone. Her hand was on the receiver. Across the street was Daniel Reed, but behind Daniel was another man, Frank Dalton, the detective. He had followed them too. Mercer stared at the image. The police investigation had not ended. It had moved underground. Dalton had continued tracking Rachel even after the case became inactive. Why? Because he had been ordered to. The photographs showed him appearing again and again. Phoenix, Albuquerque, Denver, then Oregon. He had followed her for years. The final photograph of Dalton was taken in 1987. He stood outside a grocery store. Across the street, Rachel was entering a car. Beside her was Ethan. Dalton was watching. But the image contained another clue. A vehicle parked behind him. A black sedan. The same model associated with Charles Vane, but Vane had supposedly been too ill to travel. He died 3 years later. Investigators checked his medical records. He had been diagnosed with cancer, but there were gaps. Several weeks in 1985 had no medical records, no hospital visits, no treatment, no explanation. Could Vane have been traveling? Investigators found airline records. He had flown under an alias. The destination? Oregon, the same state where Rachel eventually disappeared. That was when the investigators realized the case had another layer. Vane had not simply ordered Rachel's disappearance. He had continued searching for her, and if he had found her, he may have been responsible for what happened next. But there was no evidence that Rachel ever crossed paths with Vane again until a hotel registry appeared. March 1987. A small Oregon motel. Rachel had checked in under a false name. Ethan was listed in the next room. One night later, a third guest checked in. The name was false, but the handwriting matched Charles Vane. Investigators compared the signature. It was nearly identical. Vane had found her, but what happened inside that motel remained unknown. The room had been destroyed by fire 6 months later. Official cause? Electrical fault. But the fire report contained a strange detail. A burned cassette recorder had been recovered. The serial number was unreadable. The motel owner had thrown it away. Investigators now wondered whether the fire had been deliberate. They searched the old debris records. Nothing remained. Then, a retired firefighter came forward. He remembered the fire. He said one thing had bothered him. The room had been burning from the inside, but the smoke detector had been disconnected. Someone had deliberately disabled it. The fire was not an accident. It was an attempt to destroy evidence, and one witness had seen a woman leaving the motel minutes before the flames spread. She was wearing a blue coat. Rachel, alive again. The witness also saw a man chasing her. Tall, gray hair, dark suit. Charles Vane. Rachel escaped. Vane disappeared. The fire destroyed the room, but it did not destroy everything. A forensic team recovered a small metal fragment from the debris. It belonged to a cassette recorder. The device had been damaged beyond repair, but the memory tape inside had survived. The tape was sent to a laboratory. After months of restoration, the audio became readable. Rachel's voice appeared first. She was breathing quickly. "Ethan, we have to leave." Ethan answered, "Where?" "Anywhere." "What happened?" "He found us." "Who?" Rachel paused, then whispered, "Vane." Ethan asked, "Did he see you?" "Yes." "Did he say anything?" Rachel's voice broke. "He said my father didn't die in an accident." Silence. Then Ethan asked, "What did he say?" Rachel answered, "He said my father knew about the money." The tape crackled. Then came the sentence that changed the case. "He said my father helped him hide it." Ethan was silent. Rachel continued, "Then he told me the worst part." "What?" Rachel whispered, "My father wasn't the first." The recording ended. Mercer replayed it. "My father wasn't the first." That meant the conspiracy began before 1978, perhaps years earlier. Perhaps Rachel's father's death had been only one piece of a much larger operation. The investigators began examining old construction accidents, men who died, workers who vanished, reports that were altered, claims that were settled unusually quickly. They found a pattern. Between 1972 and 1984, 7 workers connected to Vane's companies had died in suspicious accidents. Each case was ruled accidental. Each involved defective equipment. Each resulted in insurance payments. And each file had passed through the same chain of people: Vane, Reed, Holloway, Dalton. Rachel had found the pattern. That was why she had become a target. But the biggest question remained unanswered. If Rachel survived until at least 1987, what happened after that? Why did she disappear again? Why did Ethan disappear? Why did the photographs stop? Investigators searched Oregon records. They found Rachel under another name, Rebecca Morgan. She had rented a small house in 1988. She worked at a bookstore. She paid cash. She had no driver's license, no family contact, no known social life. Then, one afternoon, she vanished. The landlord found the house empty. No struggle, no blood, no belongings. Only one photograph left on the kitchen table. It showed Rachel with her mother. The photograph had been taken years earlier. On the back was written, "I'm sorry." Beside it was a train ticket. Destination: Seattle. Investigators followed the trail. Seattle, then Vancouver, then nothing. The trail ended. But Ethan's notebook contained one final entry, dated October 1988. She left alone. Then another line. "She told me never to look for her again." The investigators finally understood. Rachel had survived. She had escaped. She had built new identities. She had crossed state lines. She had deliberately disappeared. But someone had continued hunting her. And perhaps she had eventually decided the only way to survive was to erase herself completely. Yet the cold case was still not solved. A murder could not be proven. A death could not be proven. A body had never been found. The evidence suggested kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud, witness intimidation, but not murder. Then investigators tested the last remaining biological sample, the blood-stained cloth from the mine. The laboratory found DNA, Rachel's DNA, and another profile. This time, the match was exact. The second profile belonged to a man still alive. Not Andrew, not Daniel, not Holloway, not Dalton, not Vane, not Elliot. It belonged to Peter Caldwell, Rachel's supposed brother, the man who claimed he had helped her, the man who had given investigators the first clue, the man who had insisted she escape. His DNA was on the cloth, but Caldwell had never admitted being at the mine. When investigators confronted him, he became silent. Then he said something unexpected. "I didn't hurt her." Mercer asked, "Then why is your DNA there?" Caldwell looked down. "Because I was there. On November 8th? Yes." "What happened?" Caldwell's eyes filled with tears. "I found her. Alive? Yes. Where? The mine. What did you do? I helped her. Where did she go? Caldwell hesitated, then whispered, She didn't go anywhere. Mercer froze. What does that mean? Caldwell looked toward the window. I lied. The room went silent. Caldwell finally confessed that he had found Rachel injured inside the mine, but he had not taken her to safety. He had taken her somewhere else, somewhere no one had searched, a place connected to their father's death, an abandoned company property in northern Arizona. Caldwell said Rachel had begged him to take her there. She wanted the original documents. She wanted proof. She believed the truth would protect her. But when they arrived, someone was already waiting. Caldwell refused to say who. Mercer pressed him. Who? Caldwell finally looked up and spoke a name that investigators had never considered. Rachel's own mother. The confession shattered the case, because if Caldwell was telling the truth, Rachel's disappearance had not ended with the criminals hunting her. Someone inside her own family had known where she was, and the person who had apparently received the last message from Rachel may have known more than anyone ever realized. Caldwell slid a photograph across the table. It showed Rachel standing beside a woman, her mother. The date was November 14th, Sill, 1984. Rachel was alive. Her mother was with her. And behind them stood Frank Dalton. 3 people. 1 photograph. 1 secret. And on the back, Rachel had written 5 words. Mom knows the whole truth. The photograph changed everything. For 37 years, Rachel Morgan's mother had been remembered as the woman who waited, the mother who called police, the mother who refused to believe her daughter was dead, the mother who appeared in every newspaper photograph with the same exhausted expression. But the photograph from November 14th, Sill, 1984, showed something investigators had never imagined. Rachel was alive. Her mother was standing beside her. And Frank Dalton was there. 3 people. 1 location. No official record. No police report. No explanation. On the back, Rachel had written 5 words. Mom knows the whole truth. Mercer placed the photograph on the table. He looked at Peter Caldwell. Where was this taken? Caldwell shook his head. You already know. No, I don't. Caldwell pointed to the background. A faded water tower. An old concrete building. A road disappearing into desert. Mercer recognized it. The old vein processing facility. It had been abandoned in 1981. The building had appeared in company records, but investigators had never searched it. Not once. Caldwell said Rachel had been taken there after leaving the mine. She had wanted the original documents proving her father's death was not an accident. She believed those documents were hidden inside the facility. Her mother knew about them. Dalton knew about them. And Vane had been desperate to find them. Mercer asked Caldwell why Rachel's mother had been there. Caldwell answered slowly. Because Rachel called her. From where? The mine. When? November 13th. Mercer checked the timeline. That meant Rachel had contacted her mother while still hiding from the men hunting her. But why would her mother go to the facility? Caldwell's answer was simple. Rachel told her where the evidence was. Mercer stared at him. Then why didn't her mother call police? Because she didn't trust them. Why? Because Dalton was already there. The photograph suddenly made sense. Dalton was not investigating. He was waiting. He had followed Rachel's mother to the facility. He knew Rachel was alive. He knew where she was. And yet the official investigation continued describing Rachel as missing. Caldwell said Rachel had entered the building carrying a small metal box. Inside were documents, original payroll records, insurance claims, photographs, and 1 report about her father's death. Rachel believed the report could expose Vane, but when she opened the box, something was missing. The original accident report. Someone had taken it. Rachel became furious. She accused her mother. Her mother denied knowing where it was. Then Dalton entered. He told Rachel to leave. Rachel refused. She said she would go to the newspapers. Dalton warned her. You don't understand what you're holding. Rachel answered, I understand exactly. Then the argument became louder. Caldwell said he stayed outside. He heard Rachel scream. He heard a door slam. Then silence. When he entered the building, Rachel was gone. Her mother was crying. Dalton was standing beside the table. The metal box was open. The documents were missing. Caldwell said he demanded to know where Rachel had gone. Dalton told him she had left through the rear entrance. Caldwell followed. But Rachel was nowhere outside. She had disappeared again. Mercer listened without speaking. "You're telling me Dalton took her?" Caldwell shook his head. "No." "Then who?" Caldwell looked toward the floor. "Her mother." The words landed like a blow. Rachel's mother had taken her daughter away, not to hurt her, to hide her. Caldwell said Rachel's mother had been terrified. She knew the police were compromised. She knew Dalton was working for Vane. She believed that if Rachel stayed in Arizona, she would die. So she took Rachel to a safe house, a small property outside Flagstaff. Nobody knew about it. Not the police, not Vane, not even Caldwell. Rachel stayed there for several weeks. Her mother brought food, clothes, money, fake identification. But Rachel wanted to return home. She wanted to see her family. Her mother refused because someone was watching the house. Someone was following every movement. Then, in December 1984, Rachel disappeared again. This time, she left willingly. She left a note. "I can't keep hiding." Her mother found it on the kitchen table. She never saw Rachel again. Mercer asked Caldwell how he knew all this. Caldwell reached into his coat. He removed another Cosette. "This was given to me in 1985. "By whom?" "Rachel." Mercer inserted the tape. Static. Then Rachel's voice. Older. Tired. But unmistakable. "Peter, if you're hearing this, I'm gone." A pause. "Don't try to find me." Another pause. "I need you to understand something." Rachel's voice became quieter. "Mom didn't betray me." Mercer leaned closer. "She saved me." Then Rachel said the sentence that would haunt the investigator. "But she also lied to me." The tape continued. "She knew who killed Dad." Silence. "She knew before I did." The recording ended. Mercer replayed it. Rachel believed her mother had known the truth about her father's death, but she also believed her mother had protected her. That meant the family had been hiding something for years. Investigators reopened the 1978 accident. Rachel's father had been an equipment supervisor at a Vane-owned mining facility. The official report said a pressure valve failed. The machine exploded. 3 workers died. Rachel's father was one of them. But the original maintenance log told a different story. The valve had been replaced 2 days before the accident. It was brand new. The replacement had been approved by Frank Holloway, the same man later connected to Rachel's kidnapping. The maintenance log contained another signature, Andrew Reeves, and beneath it, a handwritten note. "Do not report malfunction." Investigators compared the handwriting. It matched Andrew. The accident had been deliberate. But why kill 3 workers? Because they had discovered something, a hidden storage system beneath the mine. The mine had not simply produced mineral. It had been used to hide company records, illegal payments, fake insurance claims, cash transfers, names, dates, evidence. The workers had found it. Vane needed them silent. Rachel's father had refused. So he died. 6 years later, Rachel discovered the same hidden system. History repeated itself. But this time, Rachel fought back. She copied documents. She photographed records. She contacted people. And that was why Vane became desperate. The investigators now understood the motive, but they still needed to prove what happened after Rachel disappeared. They searched the Flagstaff property. It had been sold in 1990. The current owner knew nothing about Rachel, but an old shed remained. Inside was a wooden trunk. The trunk contained clothing, a diary, and a photograph of Rachel. The photograph was dated January 1985. She was alive. Her hair had been cut. Her face looked thinner, but she was smiling. For the first time, investigators saw Rachel looking happy after her disappearance. On the back she had written, "I'm safe for now." Then another line, "Mom was right." The diary contained several entries. Most were short. Rachel wrote about fear, about changing names, about moving between towns, about avoiding telephones. She never mentioned the men directly. She used initials A, D, F, Vi, but one entry was different. January 18th. Someone found the house. January 19th. Mom says we have to leave. January 20th. I saw Dalton. January 21st. I don't know who to trust anymore. Then nothing for 11 days. The next entry was February 2nd. Mom is gone. That sentence stopped Mercer cold. What did it mean? Rachel's mother had disappeared from the safe house. Why? The investigators searched death records. She had not died. They searched hospital records. Nothing. They searched travel records. Nothing. Rachel's mother had simply vanished, but Caldwell claimed she had returned home weeks later. That meant someone had hidden the disappearance. Mercer questioned him. Why didn't she report Rachel's location? Because Rachel told her not to. Why? Because someone was listening. Who? Caldwell shook his head. She never said. Then he added something. She told me one thing. What? She said the person who was watching them wasn't working for Vane. Mercer paused. Then who? Caldwell looked at him. Someone higher. The phrase sounded absurd until investigators examined the insurance records. The fraudulent claims had been connected to a state-funded development program. Money had been allocated for infrastructure. The construction company received contract. Insurance claims inflated the cost. Money disappeared. The scheme extended beyond one company. Several government officials had approved the contract. Several banks had processed the transfer. And one state official had signed the original development agreement. His name was Richard Bell. Bell had been a senior state administrator in 1984. He had also been a close associate of Charles Vane. Bell was never interviewed in Rachel's case. He died in 1994, but his personal records survived. Inside his office files was a handwritten note. Morgan knows. Another note. Deal with her quietly. The handwriting belonged to Vane. The investigators now had motive. They had conspiracy. They had witnesses. They had DNA. They had photographs. They had recordings. But Rachel's final fate remained uncertain. Then came a discovery from Canada. A genealogy search identified a woman living near Vancouver. Her name was Rebecca Lane. She had no criminal history, no known connection to Arizona. She had worked as a bookkeeper. She lived quietly. She had one unusual detail in her history. Her birth records had been amended in 1985. Her original identity had been seized. Investigators requested the documents. The original name was missing, but the date of birth matched Rachel Morgan. The investigators froze. Rebecca Lane could be Rachel. The DNA comparison was authorized. A discarded drinking cup was obtained. The laboratory ran the sample. The result was extraordinary. Rebecca Lane was Rachel Morgan, alive, 37 years after she disappeared. The case that had begun as a suspected murder suddenly became something else entirely. Rachel Morgan had been living under another identity for decades. Investigators located her residence, but she was gone. Again, she had left 2 months early. The landlord said she had received a letter. After reading it, she packed one suitcase. She did not tell anyone where she was going, but she left something behind. A small envelope. Inside was a photograph. The photograph showed Rachel as a young woman, standing beside her mother. On the back was written, "Some truths are worth surviving for." There was also a telephone number. The number had been disconnected, but investigators traced its history. It had belonged to a law office. The attorney had died. His records were transferred to another firm. Inside those records was a sealed envelope. The envelope was addressed to Rachel. It had been prepared in 1989, 5 years after her disappearance. The attorney had been instructed to release it only if Rachel was ever confirmed alive. Inside was a statement from her mother. It explained everything. Rachel's father had discovered the money network. He had planned to expose it. Vane learned about it. The accident was arranged. Rachel's mother knew, but she had been threatened. She was told that if she spoke, Rachel would be next. For 6 years, she stayed silent. Then Rachel discovered the truth. Her mother helped her escape, but she could not tell her everything because Dalton was watching, because Vane had people everywhere, because the police investigation itself had been compromised, and because Rachel's mother believed silence was the only way to keep her alive. The final page contained a confession. I knew she was alive. I knew where she was. I never told the police. I chose my daughter over the truth. Mercer sat alone with the statement. For decades, the case had been treated as a murder, but Rachel had survived. Her mother had protected her. Ethan had helped her. Caldwell had helped her. And yet several men had hunted her across multiple states. The DNA discovery had not revealed a killer. It had revealed something more complicated. A conspiracy built on fear. A network that survived because people remained silent. But one question still remained. Why had Rachel disappeared from Vancouver again? Investigators returned to the evidence recovered from Ethan's belongings. There was one final photograph. The image had never been developed. A modern scanner revealed the hidden friend. Rachel was standing on a railway platform. She was holding a suitcase. Beside her stood an older woman, her mother. The photograph was dated 1991. Rachel's mother had supposedly disappeared from the safe house in 1985, but there she was, alive, standing beside her daughter. And behind them, reflected in the train window, was a man, Frank Dalton, still watching, still following. Rachel had escaped once, then twice, but someone had never stopped looking. On the back of the photograph was one final sentence. This is the last time we saw him. The investigators enlarged the reflection. Dalton was holding something. A small Cosette recorder. The same model recovered from the mine. And beside him was another person. A man whose face had been deliberately scratched from the photograph. The identity was impossible to determine until forensic enhancement revealed the shape of a distinctive ring, a silver ring. The same ring seen in the 1984 cabin photograph. The same ring worn by Daniel Reed. But Daniel was dead, which meant someone else had inherited it. Someone related to him. Someone still alive. And when investigators compared the family DNA, the result came back with a match. The ring belonged to Daniel's son, a man who had been only 12 years old when Rachel disappeared. He had never been interviewed. He had never appeared in the case, but his DNA was connected to the unknown male profile recovered from the mine. The investigation had found a new suspect, not from 1984, from the next generation. A man who had spent decades living under his father's shadow. A man who knew the family secrets. A man who had inherited the ring. And according to the photograph, he had been with Dalton in 1991. Investigators found his current address. They went to the house. Nobody answered. The curtains were closed. The mailbox was empty. The garage was locked. Then a neighbor said something chill. He left yesterday. Did he say where? The neighbor shook his head. But he left a note. What note? The neighbor pointed toward the driveway. On the ground was a torn piece of paper. 5 words. She was never supposed to survive. And beneath them was a date. November 3rd, Sill 1984. The original day Rachel disappeared. The date investigators had spent decades trying to understand. The date when one woman vanished. The date when an entire conspiracy began collapsing. And the date when someone had made a decision that would haunt Arizona for generations. Because Rachel Morgan had survived. But the people who tried to erase her had never stopped searching. And now, after 37 years, the DNA evidence had finally connected the past to someone still alive. The cold case was no longer buried. It was moving. And the person carrying its darkest secret had just disappeared again.